Hi, welcome to the How Do I series for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2013. My name is Vyacheslav Babic. I'm a Microsoft Dynamics NAV MVP and I'll present how to consume query data from a Windows 8 application. At the end of this video, you will have a simple Windows 8 application that shows data from a NAV 2013 query in an intuitive and easy to navigate way. In the course of this demo, you'll create a Windows Store application that consumes a query from NAV 2013. You'll do this in 5 easy steps. The first step is to create a new query and publish it as an OData web service. I'll first create a new query. It's going to be a simple query that combines the data from 3 tables: customer, salesperson, purchaser, and location. I assume that you already know how to create a query, so I'll skip to the end of the query creation process and simply show how the finished query looks. I'll now save the query as 50,001 customers by location and then preview it to verify that it correctly selects the data that I need: customer information with additional fields from the salesperson, purchaser, and location tables. The next step is to publish the query as a web service. Search for the web services page. Press enter to run it. Then click new to create a new web service. Specify that it'll be a query service for the query 50,001. Call it customers and then finally publish it. To verify that the new web service is available as OData, start Internet Explorer and enter the URL of NAV 2013 OData Web Services. In the XML document that you get, you can see that the customer's web service is included and available. You can enter the company URL and then navigate to the customer service itself to verify that it returns the data from the customer table in NAV. Now that the query is available through OData, you can create a new application and connect it to the OData service that you have just published. Create a new project, specify the Windows Store template, and then select the Grid App XAML template. Name the new project NAV 2013 OData Sample, and then complete the creation. When the project is created, add a new service reference. In the address field, specify the URL of the NAV 2013 OData Web Services. Then click Go to connect to it. If you're doing this for the first time, you'll get an error. Click Details to learn more. The error occurs because the WCF data services are not installed by default and you must install them before you can continue. Copy the URL given in the dialog and browse to it. Then click OData Client Tools for Windows Store Apps. Then click Download. And then click Run. When the tools download, install them by following the setup wizard. When the wizard completes, you must restart your computer. Click Restart to complete the setup process. After the computer restarts, reopen the Visual Studio and then complete adding the service reference. In the address field, specify the same URL as you did the first time, and then click Go. This time, the service reference resolves, and you can see that the customer service is available. In the namespace field, simply enter NAV and then click OK to complete the process. Now let's take a look at what this sample application does. Click Local Machine to start the debug process. The application shows some sample data grouped into multiple groups. Each group contains several items. When you click on a group title, you get detailed information about the group contents, and when you click a specific item, you get detailed information about that item. Now we'll reuse this navigation structure to present data from NAV. Groups will represent locations and items will represent customers. When you click a location, you see the customers for that location, and when you click a customer, you get the customer details. We must replace the code that feeds the sample data with the code that consumes the query from NAV. To see how the sample data is fed, open the C# code for the grouped items page and then check the load state method. This method takes the data from the sample data source class. Let's check the class to see what it does. The class contains some methods that allow it to be called as a singleton, and the constructor for the class actually feeds the hard-coded demo data to the application. Okay, we now have the query and the skeleton for our new app. Let's now beef it up with some classes to access our actual data from NAV. Back in Visual Studio, create a new class and call it NAV ODataSource. In the body of this class, paste the code from the sample data source class. It should be all code except for the constructor. You will create a constructor from scratch. First, replace the static member reference to the sample data source with the NAV ODataSource to make sure that the singleton pattern in this class refers to your new class. Then, create the constructor method stub. The next step is to create the populate data method. This method will populate the data from the NAV query. It receives a parameter which corresponds to the all groups property of the data source. This property of this class contains the groups that the application must show on the first level. From the constructor, call this method to make sure that the data is properly populated. Then, make sure to substitute the sample data source call in the grouped items page with a call to the NAV ODataSource class. Back in the populate data method, connect to the NAV OData service using the default URL and then configure the connection to use the default network credentials for the account running the application. Here's another feature of Windows Store applications. By default, they do not allow the built-in credentials. To allow them, open the package application manifest file, then click Capabilities, and then enable the Enterprise Authentication capability. Let's consume the query now. Normally, you simply write a link query to select data. However, another limitation prevents you from simply using this pattern. In Windows 8, the applications cannot consume the internet data synchronously. This requires several changes to the code. First, you must mark your method as asynchronous. The next step in the process of making the NAV OData consumption asynchronous is to cast your link query to a data service query generic type. Make sure to use the customers type. Finally, you must create a task that will connect to the data source asynchronously and read the data. We'll first retrieve the list of all locations to use as the first level groups. To execute the query against the NAV OData web services, use the await keyword. This specifies that the execution on the main thread is waiting for the asynchronous call to complete. The query returns an IEnumerable interface, so you can call other link methods such as group by to group the results by location. Then you can select the first location in each group to mimic the select distinct access. Then you can order by location code to order results. Finally, you can convert the IEnumerable to the list of type customers. Then iterate through all locations and populate the first level groups with the information about the locations. Use the location code as the identifier, then specify the location name to show as the first line, which is the title. Then location phone number can be used as a subtitle. The assets darkgray.png file represents the default tile color that will be used to show each group. And then finally use the location address. Then add the newly created group to the all groups. Now, for each location, you must retrieve all customers and populate the location group with customer information. For that, you'll asynchronously run the same task you created earlier. Just make sure to call different link methods to narrow down the results, to include only those customers that belong to the current location. Finally, write code to iterate through all customers within a specific location, and then populate the location group with the information about each customer. Use the customer number, then use the customer name. You can use customer email as a subtitle. Specify the same image path again. We'll play with the colors a little bit later. As a description, you can use the address again, and then you can add some more information. Be creative. In the end, change the remaining XAML pages in the application to use the NAV-O data source instead of the sample data source class. And you're good to go. At this stage, you have a new data source class that reads the NAV 2013 query data from an OData web service. Let's run the application to see the results. When I run this application, it will show all locations as groups, and when I click on the location, it shows all the customers. When I click on the customer, it shows the customer details. Now let's add some colors to represent the location data more vividly. First, I'll paste some PNG files that I've created earlier. So, for example, blue, which shows the blue color, green, that shows the green color. You can see that the color names correspond to location codes in NAV. Then I'm going to make sure that instead of the dark gray, I actually show the actual location color. So if the location is blank, then I will use this dark gray location color. But if the location has a color, then I'm just going to use the actual color to represent the location. Then for the location itself, I will just substitute this dark gray with this new color variable. And then again, the same for the customer. Again, I'm using the color instead of the generic dark gray. I'm running the application, and what I can see is that I actually have my locations represented by colors. This webcast has demonstrated how to consume query data from a Windows 8 application. Remember, you must enable enterprise authentication to allow your Windows credentials to work, and you must make all your calls asynchronously. Thanks for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in another episode of How Do I series for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2013.